You've entered BOOKSTORM with Kristen Civiletto and me, Chris Storm. This is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter, books that make a difference. We're diving down deep with beloved authors about their stories. We're exposing hot-button topics and heartfelt themes, the issues that affect each of us in our own lives, as siblings, parents, partners, friends, as human beings. We're braving new ideas, fresh thoughts, hard lessons, and important truths. Those kinds of things that stay with us long after we turn the last page and close the book. Well, welcome back, book lovers. Here we are again, and we have a special treat for you today. We have Alka Joshi. You will recognize her by her beautiful book, The Henna Artist, which was the New York Times and USA Today best-selling book. This is part of a trilogy, and we're here to talk to her about the next book in line, The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, which Kristen and I adored. But let me tell you a little bit about Alka because her history is so wonderful. She was born in Jodhpur, Rajasthan, India. She lived in the U.S. since the age of 9. Her father came here to obtain a doctorate. They decided to stay, and we're grateful for that. She has a BA from the prestigious Stanford University and an MFA from California College of the Arts. Alka ran her own advertising and PR agency for 30 years, and The Henna Artist was her very first novel. Her writing is acclaimed by so many prestigious organizations. This book was a Hello Sunshine and Reese Witherspoon pick. Reese talks about Alka's writing and says, "She captivates me from the first chapter to the last page." And Reese, Kristen, and I could not agree more. Publishers Weekly says, Alka is an eloquent author. Her debut book just gave us evocative descriptions, capturing India's sensory ambiance. And the incense, the colorful saris. She drew the reader into her moving story with a masterful balance, a yearning for self-discovery. The Library Journal says she writes an uplifting tale that highlights the power of family. This is something we can all relate to. She's also been endorsed by San Francisco Chronicle, Toronto Star, Booklist, and I could go on and on. Alka, welcome. We cannot wait to talk to you about The Secret Keeper of Jaipur today.
Thank you, Chris and Kristen. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, wonderful. Well, if you'll allow me, I'd like to give our listeners just a little bit of the background of your story, and you are free to add anything, of course, at the end or correct anything. But The Secret Keeper of Jaipur explores power, money, secrets, tradition versus modern ways, all in 1969 India. The story centers around a construction scandal and some black market activities that bring a lot of embarrassment to both the palace and to the Singh Sharma building firm. This story takes place about 12 years since the first installment, although it stands alone. And in that story and in the new story, we read about Lakshmi Kumar. She was forced to leave Jaipur in shame, and she moved to rural Shimla with her orphaned, streetwise ward Malik. And in that time, she has married an esteemed doctor. She's established a healing herb garden. And Malik, who's now 20 and educated, is sent by her back to Jaipur to do an apprenticeship with the palace. She has arranged for him to rotate through different apartments, and he's learned a lot of information in that transition. And part of the story is interesting because she really wants to prevent Malik from being tied up with maybe some of the local drug and black market activities that are going on in Shimla, so she sends him to Jaipur. Now, in this story, Malik goes to Jaipur, and again, I don't want to give away any secrets, of course, but he starts to suspect that something has gone very wrong. He sees some invoices maybe that aren't on the up and up. So after the incident that starts at the beginning of the book, we see where Lakshmi comes back to Jaipur and she uses some of her connections to start exposing with Malik some of the lies and the corruption that may be going on. Now, Lakshmi has also really looked after a widow, and this widow is somebody from a tribe in the Himalayan mountains. She has children, and Malik and this widow have a fondness for one another. So we see these traditional ways brought in. In the story, all of these characters pull together to start untangling a web of lies and deceit and so many interesting things relating to corruption and power. Did you want to add anything?
I think in this book, what I wanted to explore were things like uh, Malik was only 8 years old in the Henna Artist. He was a loyal and trusted confidant of Lakshmi. I wanted to know, after he has had this phenomenal boarding school education, he has been at school with all these wealthy, privileged boys. Has he changed from the inside or only from the outside? Now he dresses better. He wears closed-toed shoes instead of his open slippers. He wears much, finer Oxford cloth shirts as opposed to, cheap mass-manufactured goods. And so he looks so different that people in Jaipur don't recognize him. But do they recognize the person he used to be? So I wanted to explore that in The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, especially as it related to his character. And another thing I wanted to explore was Lakshmi has been his de facto mother for the last 12 years. She's his guardian. And as he grows up and tries to find his own way in life, is she going to go through the seesaw of what parents do with their children? Are they adult enough to make their own decisions? Have I taught them enough so that they can make their own decisions in life? Do I trust them to do that? And so I wanted to explore, where is Lakshmi in that trajectory in her journey as a de facto parent? I know that my parents had that same struggle going on within themselves when all three of us were getting older and figuring out what to do with our lives, and becoming our own people. I think they also went through oh my gosh, do we trust them to make their own decisions now? Have we done enough to prepare them for this world? So those are two things that I really did want to explore in The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, beyond the story that you have just described, which is beautiful, by the way. I love your description.
Wonderful. Well, those are themes that echo across cultures, across time, and that's one of the beautiful things about your story. And if you're ready to enter the storm, Chris, why don't you start us off?
We are ready, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what you just said about the change in his clothing after going to the private school. Because I want to say to you, thank you for taking the reader on a wondrous journey through the sights and smells and hearts and minds of India. I did not want to come back home. There was a shocking juxtaposition, however, of the life of the royalty versus the more impoverished people living at the foot of the Himalayan mountains. And you described it so clearly. One had the heat versus the coolness, the scent of fragrant oils in the palace versus the goat smell of the mountains, the beautifully woven garments of gold in the palace versus the handcrafted sweaters from the wool of the sheep. Yet you showed the reader that both of these people, they were both clever, they were both smart, they both had the same desires and needs for love and purpose and belonging. And you said, did Malik change on the inside or just the outside? This is a great question I wish you would explore a little deeper. Can you go into any greater detail as the writer about your personal knowledge of these two extreme classes, their similarities and their differences?
Yes, when I was growing up in Rajasthan, we would often escape the hot summers by going up into Shimla. Shimla is about a 6-hour span, distance from Jaipur. And it's up in the Himalayan foothills, so it's a lot cooler. And Shimla used to be the British capital during the summers because the Brits couldn't stand the summers of Rajasthan either. So there are a lot of conveniences set up in Shimla for Europeans. There's the Regency Hotel, there is the Viceregal Lodge, there is a beautiful library, there's the Gaiety Theater where they would put on plays. So it's a very sophisticated place. But what I found as a child was that not only was it sophisticated for a certain class of people, but there were these nomads that would go through the hills. There were these indigenous peoples whom you could always tell apart from everyone else because they had different clothing. They wore different kinds of jewelry. And I always wondered about them as a kid. So when it came to writing The Secret Keeper, I started to do a lot of research on these nomads that I had not known anything about as a child. I found that they still exist and that they still go up and down the Himalayan mountains depending on the season. Their herds have to keep moving. They're herds of sheep and goat and water buffalo in order to graze up and down the mountains, but also because, as we all know from the Himalayas, from Mount Everest, we know about the climbs that people do up there. It gets really cold in the wintertime. And so you can't just live up there all year round. And they have huts up there for the summer, but then as the weather gets cooler, they come down into the foothills. And what I found about them was that they are so used to, depending on the land, depending on the weather, depending on their animals, that they live actually much closer to, I think, what really matters in life. They live much closer to the organic way of living from thousands of years ago that we all lived. When we have people like the Singhs, the Maharanis, and even Lakshmi and Malik now, they live closer to the city environment where the infrastructure of paved roads and running water and electricity are available. They rely more on things like power. They rely more on things like prestige and status. They're much more focused on those things than they are survival mode as the nomads are. But what I found in each of these classes is that they have a basic similarity. It's the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Everybody needs food, shelter, clothing, and belonging. And so because of that similarity, I wanted to explore those two different polar opposites, basically. I wanted to, get to the heart of the fact that they're all human, that they all need love and they need belonging and they need to be with one another. That's the essence of us being human. So that's what I was trying to explore in this. I think that it's something that I have always wanted to communicate, but didn't have the language or the platform to do when I was much younger. When we came over here and I was a 9-year-old immigrant, people would ask me things about India that I found very troubling. They would only ever ask me about poverty. They would only ever ask me about why we let people be illiterate when there was schooling to be had. Why did Indians allow so many people to go hungry? And, as a 9-year-old, I didn't know how to answer that because I come from the middle class. I had not known poverty. I had not known any of these things. But what really made an impression on me is that Americans only recognized one India, and that was the poor India, the underdeveloped India. It was a reputation India had throughout the world in the 1960s when we first came to the United States. So I think as I grew older, I wanted to somehow counter that perception. I wanted to say, well, maybe you don't understand what happened to India, that it used to be a very prosperous country before the British colonized it, that the colonization took place over 250 years. And because of that, India was robbed out of so many of its natural materials, of so many of its handicrafts. It was robbed of so much that the people were left in tatters. People's self-esteem was in tatters. In addition to that, the colonizers had destroyed several of the industries because they didn't want the competition from all of the artisans in India. And so things like the textile industry, the steel industry, the shipbuilding industry had all been destroyed in India, which left millions, tens of millions of people out of work. These are the things that I want people to understand about India as I write my books. And I also want them to understand that Indians are just like them, that they have the same needs for belonging, for love, that they take care of families, that they go to work. They are not just the one perception that that people around the world are used to thinking. They are not just the poor, illiterate people. There are all kinds of complexities in India that need to be understood. So this is part and parcel of what I'm always trying to convey in my stories.
You portrayed it so beautifully. And I think that is the power of story. So we can sit and tell people, like you just did, it's not what you perceive, but when you write it through a beautiful story like this with beloved characters that we sort of climb into and fight with them and hope with them and live by them, we feel what they feel. And I thought right away, the nomads, the people who were the sheep herders in the Himalayan foothills, their life was so filled with joys. And sometimes the more simplistic the life, the greater the joy. And then you see the palace with all their wealth, but there's so many struggles going on. It was very interesting. Thank you for showing us that.
You're welcome. I love doing it.
Elka, in fact, as you were speaking, I was thinking about how two of your characters marked time historically by when India had her freedom. And that's how they figured out how old they were, for example, which I thought that was really fascinating of how important that date was to the people. Well, along the lines of what we're talking about, I really enjoyed the opposing themes of Eastern medicine versus Western medicine. And one character has a distrust of modern medicine. Even just some of the smells evoke in her a very strong response. And she relies upon her tribe's traditions and the knowledge that was passed down. And I was wondering, what underlies the distrust on both sides, frankly? And do you see Eastern versus Western type medicine as being mutually exclusive? Or is there something that we need to really think in terms of integrating aspects of both as we move forward? Because we're at a crossroads, I think, in our medical background here.
Well, I think that what I find fascinating about India is that, and I think probably all over the world, the closer to the land that people live, the more they live off the land, the less they trust Western medicine. And the closer to the cities that people live, the closer to available infrastructures they live, they distrust the more herbal remedies that have been used for generations. And I think in 1969, when the Secret Keeper of Jaipur takes place, there are still a lot of the people living closer to the land, the farmers and the nomads and different folks like that, more urban, outside of the city environments, that are mistrustful of Western medicine. And so they need to be handheld. They need to be shown what are the benefits of some Western medicine. But what I've tried to show is that you can combine Eastern and Western medicine and to the benefit of the patient. The patient should be the one to decide what is working for them. Now, when I go back to India, what I find fascinating is that I see the same people going to the Ayurvedic shop in the afternoon, and then in the morning, they have been to the cancer clinic for their Western remedies. So I think that in India, Hinduism and Indians are a very adaptable kind of people, adaptable culture. And what that means is that they have the ability to use all of their homegrown remedies, the ones that have been passed down through generations, and at the same time say, well, if I need to take a Tylenol today, I think I'll take a Tylenol. But if I need to drink my milk with a little bit of turmeric and a little bit of honey in it today in order to make sure that my joints don't ache at night, then I'll do that too. So what I find is that there's a combination of Eastern and Western medicine, and then also this kind of spirituality that comes into play, and a reliance on astrology that comes into play. And I think it's wonderful to be able to use a lot of different modalities to make yourself healthier, to make yourself feel better. It's one of the things that I think I really like to convey in my books. I do think that Indians are completely adaptable. And my mother would tell us to, choose some fennel seeds if we had a little upset tummy. She wouldn't say, oh, let's go to the doctor and, see if there's something that he needs to prescribe, because that's the way she had been raised. But if we had a toothache, she would take us to the dentist because that's, something that she felt he could work on better than anything she could make up as an herbal poultice. So I think it's wonderful to be able to combine a lot of different remedies. And I wish that the whole world kind of felt that way instead of fighting the different modalities. Why not? There's no harm in also trying an herbal remedy in addition to trying something that is, a clinical practice in the West.
Well, that was beautifully said. And I think this is also why we need to focus on biodiversity and preserving it, and worry, one of the many reasons, about climate change, because there are so many plants that we don't even understand fully yet their healing properties. And I think the rise of ethnobotany as a discipline is happening. So I suspect we're going to see a lot more of what you're discussing. I thought that was really well put.
Mm-hmm. I love that, because I do feel in this country that we are more open to homeopathic remedies, and there are a lot of pharmaceutical drugstores that are just dealing with homeopathic, and a lot of people are more gravitating to that. Let's try the more healthy remedy, and I love that about the story also. I also want to bring up this character. I loved the beloved character, Auntie Boss. And she says, and I want to quote, "The ideal outcome is always the preservation of integrity. It's painful when the consequence of the outcome is severe." The reader may also call this just doing the right thing. And what were you trying to show the reader through these complex and deep characters about the difficulty of doing the right thing and maybe the importance of that?
I think that we're always struggling with doing the right thing versus what's in our self-interest. Sometimes what's in our self-interest would be to do the selfish thing, not the right thing. And I think that's what Lakshmi is referring to. At the point in the novel that you're talking about, Lakshmi is referring to the fact that even though the right thing to do was to completely admit the error about the Royal Jewel Cinema and to rebuild it, no matter how much cost is involved, it was a difficult decision to make. And the difficult decision was, of course, having to be made by the Maharanis and the Singhs. And if they had relied on their own selfish needs, then they would have gone ahead and not done the right thing. And I think that doing the right thing, it usually involves more sacrifice. It does involve more time, money, energy, anything that will sort of make sure that you put out more than you're getting back. But I think in the end, doing the right thing helps us sleep better. Doing the right thing and having that integrity helps us to get along better with other people and to be able to live with ourselves. I think we all come at that crossroads at different times in our lives. I know that I have too. And I'll give you, an example. I think, let's say that we're speeding down a road and it's late at night. We don't see the deer that is walking across the path. And around here, where I live in Monterey, there's lots of deer that are always crossing the paths. There's lots of deer that live around in our neighborhoods. And let's say that you hit the deer and, it dies, but there was no one around to see it. So if no one was around to see it, we have a choice to make. We can either say, okay, it's going to take a lot of time, energy, and, sacrifice of my, whatever it is I have planned for the rest of the day for me to take care of this problem. Or I can just ignore it because no one saw me, and I could just ride on and let somebody else take care of this problem. But, I think that if you chose the latter course, you might not be able to live with yourself. You might always be thinking, what could I have done? Was that the right thing to do? Unless you're a true psychopath, in which I guess it doesn't matter whether you left the deer dying or not. But I think, that's an extreme example, but I think we all come at that crossroads. Do I do something in my own selfish interest, or do I do the right thing? Sometimes they're both compatible. Sometimes they're not mutually exclusive, and you get a chance to do the right thing and feel really great about it. But I think that, it's a very human problem that we all encounter. And I wanted to sort of explore that a little bit with Lakshmi and the Singhs.
And you did. And, you showed the reader, I do agree that a lot of times integrity or doing the right thing means putting yourself second. And I also felt that you opened up to the reader when you put yourself second and you're not the center of your own universe and your only goal, you really are tapping into maybe the meaning of life in there, that we're all in this together. And maybe it's not just about me getting my way and my notoriety and my wealth and my fame, but about me helping a greater purpose. And that unfolded in the story, and I loved that.
Oh, that's wonderful. I think, by the way, that parents do this all the time with their children. They will not act in their own self-interest. They will act in the right thing, which is in the interest of their children, and probably sacrifice things about themselves. I know my parents sacrificed so much of their own physical comfort so that they could send us all to private colleges.
Oh, we're both parents, and we can both attest to that. And my kids are 31 and 29, and I still would give up anything to make sure that they had, whatever they needed. It's a lifelong, parenting is a lifelong, I'll be 100, God willing, and they'll be 80. I'll still be worried about what they're doing.
I know, right? So I'm 64 now, and let's say I'm having a bad day and I'm talking to my father, who is now 90 or 93. He's one of those people who never knew how old he was. And that's where I got the idea for Malik not knowing how old he is.
Wow.
Because dad was born at a time in 1933 when, there weren't birth certificates handed out. And he was probably, he was a home birth. So, I was talking to my dad and I'm having a bad day, and Dad goes, "Oh, honey, why don't, you can just come spend a few days with me. You can just come and spend, go ahead and just come live with me if you want to." And I'm like, "Dad, I'm 64 years old. I can take care of myself." But, he will always sacrifice his comfort to make sure any of his children are fine.
How
awesome.
Wonderful.
I have a question that harkens back to your title. There's an underlying theme, of course, in your story relating to secrets and the advantage that they can afford a secret keeper, secret holder. And one of the characters remarks that sometimes there's more power to keeping a secret because it engenders loyalty from others. And by the way, in your story, I absolutely loved the jeweler. I think he held more secrets than probably anybody. But in our day and age, there's a pressure to put things on blast, to put them on social media and make everything known. And I was wondering how you think your characters would view our more casual approach to secrets and secret keeping.
I love that question because I had not thought about how let's say Lakshmi, Malik, and the jeweler view secrets as opposed to other people in the story viewing secrets. I think that those three in particular, and probably Dr. Kumar would be included in that category, I think that they view secrets as something that should only be revealed if it is for the greater good. If the secret is going to help a greater good, great, let's go ahead and reveal it. But if not, there is no value to revealing a secret that is only for public consumption, that is only for the gossip eaters. And by the way, I made up that term gossip eaters because to me, it seemed as if people who live off of secrets and spread them around are just like people who eat rumors morning, noon, and night. And so I think that the jeweler, and by the way, he's also one of my favorite characters. I think the jeweler would only reveal a secret, maybe to his own patrons, if it was something that was in their best interest. Like, if he knew that they were hard up for money and he might present them with a wedding set that would be more in their price range, then he would have suggested to them if they were in more flush times. So I think he would only use the knowledge that he has, the private knowledge that he has, for greater good. I think that, to achieve better outcomes, the way that it happened in the Royal Jewel Cinema in The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, Lakshmi is willing to, and Malik are willing to expose the secrets in order to, help the people who were disenfranchised or hurt by the collapse of the Royal Jewel Cinema. And that's the only reason why they would reveal secrets. I think that these characters would be appalled at today's obsession with exposing secrets just for the titillation factor, just for the sensational, ability to sell more books or more, media, or, just have more gawkers at the car crash. I think that there is value in only using secrets for good as opposed to evil.
Excellent. Another universal theme.
It's so admirable. It showed just a genuine a noble character to be able to keep a secret and not to just solely want to destroy someone by the purpose of revealing it. But like my prior question, if you're going to reveal it, it is for a greater good. Sometimes they need to come out for something, but that was a little gem in the story too, wasn't it? So we love.
Well, at the very beginning of The Secret Keeper, when Malik goes to the Singh's home and he's looking around the table and he realizes that he knows a secret about almost everybody at that dinner table. And he doesn't think to himself, oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if I could expose those secrets? No, what he's thinking is, I know secrets about these people. And, they would be surprised that I know these things about them. But it never once occurs to him that he would want to cause havoc in the family by exposing these secrets or blackmail them. And I think that once again, that goes to character. That is my way of showing that here is a character who has integrity. He is not going to expose private things about these people just to be able to say, I know things about them that you don't know. He is not that person. He is holding on to the information, not so that he can use it at a later date, but just because he just happens to know these things about these people. I think that, Lakshmi was also in that position with all these society ladies and how much they used her as a confidant. She knows so many things about the people of Jaipur that she decided not to use when she lost her business in Jaipur. She decided not to expose them or blackmail them into letting her keep her business. I think she just felt that would give away some part of her feeling about herself, some part of her identity that would not serve her in the long run.
Yes, well, Alka, you gave us a beautiful insight into the wonder and mystery of India. And we have come to know so many people as our friends in this story now. You've showed us that we are so much more alike than different. And the basic human needs of love and belonging are universal. So Kristen and I, Bookstorm Podcast, highly recommend both of these books. And I want to tell you, coming out on March 28th, 2023, is the third book in the trilogy, The Perfumist, which we cannot wait to read this. So readers, you've got some catching up to do. Henna Artist, Secret Keeper of Jaipur, and you're going to want to connect with Alka Joshi because she is so wonderful, and you can find her on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Chris and Kristen.
Thank you so much.
We will see you again before the trilogy of the next book comes out, and we cannot wait.
Thanks.
Thank you, Alka. Keep up your beautiful writing. Just love talking to her. What's a beautiful story. And she's right about so many things. It really hit me when she said that people only ask her about the little bit that they knew about India. And, people do this with the United States. I hear people tell me they come to the United States and they say, where are the cowboys? Where are the cowboy hats? That's a couple little states down south. We as a country are so many diverse states and climates and cities and rural, and it's just sort of a sad thing to be typecast into a small role like that.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the beautiful things about fiction, as you noted, and that is an opportunity to get a glimpse of a different culture and also recognize those universal themes that resonate with us as parents, as, like we talk about all the time, as family members, but also to really cherish the differences. There were so many cool things I learned. For example, the jeweler in a lot of Indian families stays with that family. They have the same jeweler for generations sometimes. Wow. And what an interesting thing. We don't necessarily do that here. I mean, maybe some people do, but it was an important part of their family because of the tradition and not just the monetary value, but also the symbolic value that jewelry had in Indian society.
I love that. I also wanted to just touch base on this character, Malik, who at a very young boy was adopted and given a private education and was given different opportunities that he wouldn't have had when he grew up so very poverty-stricken on the streets of India alone. And I had to compare that even to every country, including the United States, because we've talked about this before, but we have lots of extremes in living here. I don't know if you want to call it classes or what, but we have the extremely wealthy that we call the upper class. We have the middle class. We have the lower class. We have poverty-stricken people. We typecast this, I think, for many unfair ways, and I thought about this. Education, career, income, where do you live, what boards do you sit on? It becomes a little ridiculous sometimes, doesn't it, Kristen?
Yeah, it does. And, we think about how class warfare, for example, that's a term you'll hear being bandied about now more maybe than in the past. And this is really, I think there's a lot of layers to it, right? Because we can talk about wealth as being a dividing factor, but you just listed other dividing factors that we see in society too, and that is your career, your education. And I loved in the story how we saw an example of somebody, Malik, moving from one class to another class because he did go and obtain an education. He did pursue a career. Now, that's not easy to do. Obviously, there's a lot of obstacles for a lot of people. But that might be one way that people are able to break free of maybe some of the restraints of the class that they find themselves in. And I think certainly there are other ways, but that really is at the heart of a lot of discord right now in our country.
And I think, I don't want to negate all of the good that is being done within communities. There's community service, there's volunteerism, there's charities, there are people, but I do think that Malik was the perfect example to all of us to understand that sometimes people do need a helping hand. They can't get out of it alone. They're in a rut and they don't have a figurehead or someone in their family to show them the correct way. And I loved the example of one person can make a difference. You know, be a mentor, see someone in your own family that needs a little helping hand, and whatever you think that you can do.
Yeah, I love that theme as well. And, you know, I think there's two ways maybe that people can go, and one is to approach those things with gratitude of, I've got a mentor, I have a way that I can move myself forward and have upward mobility. But then there's other people who justify maybe some wrongdoing to try to get ahead, and they feel that they are owed that. And I think that's another interesting angle, because that was something that Malik in the story expressly rejected. And he could have gone in a bad direction and justified, based on his past, moving up in that way. And he chose not to. And that theme of integrity was very strong in the story.
Mm-hmm. And you can get so caught up, you know, even in our society. Each class is struggling within that class to be better than those people. You see it in upper class societies, you know, who is going to chair the ball, who is going to sit on which board, who is getting the awards and who isn't getting the awards. Sometimes I want to say, hey, slow down. This is all, people. This is all going to end. What are we doing here and today, not for ourselves as in a story, but to help other people, or our country as a whole, or this city as a whole, or my town as a whole, or my family as a whole, or my street? And we can get so caught up in ridiculousness, I think, sometimes. Just ridiculousness of societal standards and what society deems is prestigious.
Yeah, that's for sure. I know it's on your radar.
That's on my radar. That's all I got. You always get me with that question because I never have anything prepared, but that's it. Thank you. What's on your radar?
Well, I love this discipline of ethnobotany and thinking about, first of all, the tie between climate change and biodiversity and these plants that we still know nothing about. There's thousands and thousands of varieties of plants, and even varieties within a variety in a species of a plant, that we have no idea what, not just the value it has to us and what it can do for us, but even just its role in the entire ecosystem. And so for that reason, and I loved how the book really brought that out very strongly, that's something always on my mind, but especially after this book, because we looked at the healing properties of plants and the traditional ways.
I love that you brought that up because, you know, it just, when you bring things up like this, you know, we're always searching for new medicines. Could this be the cure for cancer or something like this?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, there's already studies showing that there are certain plants, for example, in the Middle East, that have tumor inhibiting properties. And, you know, they are being looked at as potentially a cure or a management tool for cancer.
Mm-hmm. Then we could bring up this whole GMO, genetically modified foods, and the trouble that could be causing, or maybe some inherent good lying in there somewhere. That's another whole can of worms, right?
That sure is. And we could definitely talk about that at some point, because there's so much we don't know. I think we have no business destroying, changing, modifying it when we just don't have a full understanding yet
of what could help us. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We highly recommend this book by Alka Joshi. Just beautiful. Get it on your radar and get reading it. Super great shout out to my sound engineer here, Mark Carey. Here he comes. Get over here, Mark. So thankful to him for everything he does. Today we had some headset problems. He figured out some splice and dice, something with his iPhone. I don't know. It's all Greek to me, but we're here because of him.
Hello. Hope you guys enjoyed the show today, and we'll see you next week.
And we cannot wait to tell you what's on our summer and fall lineup, because we are amazed. We have Lori Lico Albanese and her upcoming release, Hester. We have Ellen Marie Wiseman. We've been talking about it a while, The Lost Girls of Willowbrook. We have Brendan Slocum and the absolute treasure, The Violin Conspiracy. Our friend Viola Shipman and the summer read, The Edge of Summer. Karen Unger, Secluded Cabin, Sleep 6, Meg Waite Clayton, and the beautiful novel, The Postmistress of Paris.
In the meantime, listeners, stay on the radar with Bookstorm by visiting our website at bookstormpodcast.com. You can visit us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. If you'd like to see us in person, or better yet, one of our authors, you can view the video version of this podcast on YouTube. Just search for Bookstorm Podcast. Till next time, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep into life-changing fiction.